So Chase, I gotta say, sitting here with you, I didn't know that I was sitting with a legend. You've won many things in your past, but from what I understand, there's one in particular you're most proud of. Tell the audience, what are you most proud of that you have won a competition? What's that award that you got? What was it in your past?
Yeah, like you said, there's been many awards that stick out. The greatest one I can say goes back to first grade.
Okay, take us back.
A lot of first graders, they're losing baby teeth. And the teacher said whoever loses the most in the school year gets to be teacher of the day. So obviously being the competitive first grader that I was, had to take advantage of it. So I started off like pulling teeth that were loose. And then I saw that there were other kids that were competing with me. And then as time went on, I didn't have any loose teeth anymore. So then I had to start going to teeth that were not ready to come out. So then obviously as I started bringing those to school, because you had to show proof, she wouldn't just, take your word for it.
That's a good teacher.
The teacher started to get a little concerned and started to she called my mom.
When you showed up with 0 teeth?
Oh yeah. I can't remember the number.
You start having smoothies only and people started to get concerned.
Oh yeah. I mean, there was a lot of teeth coming out that year. And so but that was probably my greatest accomplishment. I ended up winning the competition, being how
many teeth wins a tooth pulling competition in the first grade?
I can't remember. It was double digits. I can't remember the exact amount of teeth. Yeah, it was a lot of teeth that were lost that year.
I pulled my first daughter's tooth out about a month or two ago, and I nearly passed out. So story done. However, I feel honored. The audience feels honored to be in the middle of greatness.
Let's be honest. Life's messy. Decisions are complex, and it's not all black and white. But these are the decisions that shape our growth. Welcome to The Tension. Let's get into it.
So everybody, as always, we are going to explore a tension. These are tensions because there's not easy ways to solve them. These are not problems. These are tensions that we will deal with for the rest of our life. And we have none other than Chase Bertrand here. Chase Bertrand has been with 49 Financial now for almost a decade. He's got all of these amazing things that we'll talk about that really lead up to this topic around what is this tension between plans, right? We all make plans versus the reality that sets in when they don't necessarily go the way we want it to. And you will learn so many things today around just practical takeaways of how do you think through that when your plans don't often go that way, but also what happens when plans you never even had a control over don't go your way. What do you do? And so we're really excited. Chase is an amazing advisor. He leads one of the top teams in 49 Financial here in Austin, Texas. He is a wonderful husband and a dad. He's got one and another on the way. And so Chase, welcome to the show. We are super excited to explore this with you.
I appreciate it, Travis. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Chase, we're going to get started with this tension, right? Plans versus reality setting in. And so let's go back. I like to take any of our guests back as far as they will go and just really learn about all of the things in their life that have helped shape how they've managed that tension. So for you, take us back, elementary school or first memories. When did you first feel like you understood this tension of, hey, I had a plan. This is how I wanted it to go. It's not going that way. Like, what was that event?
Yeah, if I think back to the very first time that it happened, I was 4 years old. And it was my first time to play any type of competitive.
This is pre-losing the teeth.
Okay, so right. I don't know how many I had at that point at 4 years old. It was my first time playing organized sports. I was playing soccer. I was a part of the team named the Gators, and I think I still have the trophy today because we didn't lose a game.
Let's go.
Part of my plan was not just to win. I just didn't want the other team to also score, which really made it tough for parents who obviously want their kids to have fun out there.
Sure.
And even though we were undefeated in that season, every time a kid would score, even if we were up by a lot, I would still get upset, frustrated to the point that I would be in tears. And then I would get in trouble by my family because I was being too competitive. Okay. That was the first time that I would say I looked at winning and just loved it. And I ended up telling the coaches later on, I was like, hey, because they kept telling me like, hey, you need to have fun. Like, we're just all out here to enjoy it. But for me, I told them, I said, well, winning is fun and scoring goals is fun. And, we didn't have participation trophies back then. So, and I came from a very competitive family. So,
tell us more there. Wait, competitive family. Tell me more. Because yes, the Gators wanting to win all the things, but I know your background. But tell listeners what it was like, kind of growing up in this type of climate of hyper competitiveness.
Yeah. So one of the running jokes in my family and my friend group is that I'm the least athletic cousin in the family. I had two cousins that ended up playing high level for Texas A&M, one for baseball, one for football. Grew up with a number of athletes. To give you some just context, whenever I started playing football, I played running back. In one of my first games, I actually I didn't really get hurt that bad, but it kind of hurt a little bit. Ended up, I laid on the field and the medical staff had to run out and come get me.
Whoa.
Well, then I went back in the next drive and my uncle told me after the game, he said, hey, I'm going to be one of your biggest fans and one of your biggest critics. But at the end of the day, if I see you lay on the field again, both your legs better be broken. And if they're broken, you need to crawl off the field. So that tells you anything about my family and, just being competitive.
Boy, I'll tell you, Christmas times must have been something over there. Huh?
I'm telling you, he's probably gonna hate me for saying that, but it's
made you stronger.
Made me stronger. It definitely, obviously, made a lot of friends, shaped the who I am today in a number of different ways. So yeah, if that tells you anything about my background.
Well, it's good to know. So let's go back to the Gators. So talk to us, like, what was that like? Like, do you remember even that young of this first time that you faced this tension? Like, what did you think? What did you do?
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I've definitely grown up since then, because I can tell you that there's two stories that stick out in my mind. One, I was taken out of the game because they said, hey, we're going to let some other kids play and we're going to let the other team, score. I didn't like that. So once the other team started to score, I ended up running on the field and having to tell one of the kids to get off, and which, obviously that wasn't good for both put the coach in a tough position. And, but that was one of the stories. The other one I can think of, they ended up putting me in, but they said, you can't score. You can only play defense. So what I ended up doing is, I just love scoring. So what I said is, all right, I'm just going to steal the ball from the other team. And then I'm just going to go score it in our goal to give them a point, just so I can go and start scoring. Just feel it and just start. And then, and if they got close enough, obviously I could just start, making some of our own goals again. But yeah, that's the two stories that stick out in my head back from soccer. And my family's like, I don't know, how you're just born this way or what led you to it. But if that gives you anything about, from a background standpoint.
Yeah. So it sounds like your first memories of facing this tension of, this is what I want to have happen versus the reality didn't go as well.
No.
It sounds like probably what most of us would say when we first were met with the, I want it to be this way. It's not. Yeah, I can guess all of us have a story that we responded that way. But as you said, you've grown up. So take us through this. So you grow up. This is when you're young. It's fun to start there. But take us even to let's get to even high school, right? If there's memories there, as you've now matured a decade, what can you remember as a story that was this next big test of plans versus reality?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say my first inflection point in time was as I started getting to high school. I started to think about, hey, I have this plan where now I get to decide where the next step of my life is going to be, because I'm going to graduate, from high school here soon. And it's even crazy just going back and thinking and putting myself into that point in life and that perspective that I had at the time. But my big thing was I was going to go play, college football. And where I'm from, it's a big high school. Texas high school football is huge. Sports are big for the community. The place that I went to high school at, historic, Texas high school, from a football and baseball standpoint. So as I started to get and go throughout the years in high school, I started to be told like, hey, you can go play, college football, and started to really, have success. And so I started as anybody. When you start to have, you're good at something and you have a desire to do something, it definitely shapes your identity and who you are. And so my plan was, after my junior year, I would say it was really full speed. Had a really good year. I was invited to all these like different Nike camps. I remember there was a Nike camp in Houston where there was 15 guys at it. I was the only person who didn't have a D1 offer to an SEC or Big 12 school.
Okay. So elite company. Got it.
Elite company. Yeah. So, and there was a guy who got me invited to it that he said, hey, it's kind of funny. He's like, you need to like really go out there and impress them. So get at the front of the line whenever you get out there. So there's pictures of me and I'm like at the front of the line because I got in line first. And there's like 15 of these guys who ended up like going and starting at all the big, SEC and Big 12 schools. So and you did that and then like returning. I mean, I know this is probably going to sound silly for a lot of people. I feel like I'm talking like a high school hero, but I
could throw a quarter mile at football.
I know people they're gonna listen to this and make fun of me afterwards. But yeah, back in my day, I was like third returning running back in the state of Texas. So that's just
you should be proud. That's true.
And set the stage for a lot of my identity was football and sports, and that's what it was from the time I was 4 years old to 18. And then you look up at 18. And just for one reason or another, just the offers didn't start, they weren't coming in. And, and that was, I would say a tough pill to swallow when your entire life is spent around, sports. And I think people out there,
like you said, even your identity, I think that's such an interesting word. Identity is in this moment happening that you've planned for, and all these 4 a.m. wake ups and 2 a days, everything. And now you're in it in reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I couldn't have used the word identity whenever I was probably, 17, 18 years old. But at the time, that's definitely what it was. And in that same time period, like I said, grew up, great childhood. My parents actually, they got divorced my senior year. So the kind of change of, sports are no longer what you're going to be spending your time doing. And the house you grew up in since you were 4 years old, the parents, you grew up with, like, that's all going to be, definitely a change of family systems. You're moving out of the house, moving into an apartment, and all in this just inflection point of time of, you're trying to figure out what the rest of your life looks like. And trying to, use the, little perspective you have at that point in time to be able to decide like, hey, what do I need to do? And there's just a huge unknown that took place. And I would say that's my first time that I ever really had to lean on my faith more than ever before. And I would say it's probably a big part of, like, as I think about now being 31 has made me who I am today, that first inflection point and how I was able to lean on faith versus just all these doubts and limiting beliefs that, tend to creep in.
Yeah, no doubt. So let me just make sure I have this right, because obviously I know your story, and that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on the tension, but specifically for this, like, plans versus reality. So, I mean, I want to go to that senior year because, you said identity before, right? You said it was when you have the desire and when you're good at something, but also, right, I think as you're saying with even like where you grew up, like your house was an identity for one, right? Like the way in which you brought up with two parents, and now trying to figure out what does that new world look like all of these things that you can say were your identity. And let's be honest, right? Identity is how we then make our plans, right? Like we take what we know and what we're comfortable with and what we see, and it's all shaped by this big word identity. And that's how we make our plans. And effectively all at the same time, you had what I would call a bunch of uncontrollable, like you gave your all to football and these things, and it didn't happen. You had no say in your parents deciding to divorce or not, right? You had no say where you would live. And now you're trying to figure out college and other things. But I mean, if you don't mind, like, can you take us back to a moment in that senior year that, was kind of one of these like this is probably my lowest point in all of that.
Yeah.
And maybe tell us, like, you're kind of going into faith, but like,
Yeah.
how long did it take you? Because, I really want the audience to be able to take from this like low point what's made this wonderful man that's sitting here today.
Yeah. Yeah, I would actually say that lowest point, it took place after high school graduation, and in that first probably 18 months. It was really more of why it was so tough and why it was such a low point in time was I, up until that point, had been somebody who was very intentional with what I did. I had drive, I had ambition. And at that point in time, I think a lot of people just go through this at, different stages of their life where you start to say, what I want the next 30 years to look like. And you don't have an answer for it. And you're talking to people and everyone wants to help you and support you. And you're just like, I just don't like, there's nothing really that's like hitting for me. And I would say for anybody who's like, people that are very high achieving and stuff out there, you go through those valleys. And
so it sounds like for you, as you went through a season in which, not only all the things that in some ways were happening to you that you didn't have control over, but also you're in this really big moment that, most of us have experienced, right? I'm going from high school to college. It's already a kind of stress inducing, where's my identity, these things. I don't know if there's anything more as you think about that season of outside of who you surround yourself, and that's what got you through it, that you give as advice on, it just didn't go your way there, but you kept trucking. Like you kept going forward. You didn't stop, from what it sounds like.
For me at that point in time, it was finding what is the next best step. I think, so many people, and especially me at that point, you wanted to plan out what the future was going to look like. It's tough to be able to figure out what that next step is. And so I think, for me, and this is something that was just very personalized to me, but I had family that went to A&M, and I look up to my uncle a ton, and he went to A&M, and I was just something that I always like wanted to go do, but never really thought that I could do it. And so I remember having one conversation with my mom and, grandparents, and they're like, hey, like, you've always wanted to do this. Like, why don't you, figure out what it would take to get there? And then we'll help you figure it out and just go for it. And I would tell you, it was probably a 180 that happened at that point, because I had a clear next step. And for me, I think that looks very different for whoever it is out there, based on like, what really fills your cup and like what is like the purpose you have for your life. But for me, that's what it was at that point in time. And it's something that really kind of, once I had a clear next step, everything really changed after that.
That's so good. That is so good. So effectively, when plans don't go anywhere near, frankly, you wanted them to. And then it's not like, I think what's interesting about your story is it's not like the plans just didn't go the way that you wanted them to. Like, as you said, you had to sit in it for like 18 months of like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. Like, the reality keeps setting in every day that this isn't how I drew it up or planned. And so I think it's just interesting, if you're a listener out there, that maybe whatever you're going through, it may take time. Like, you may have to be sitting in the reality before but the 1-2 punch I'm hearing, Chase, is make sure you find your faith and hope in people that you can trust, because without that, you're not going anywhere. And second is lean on those people to find next best step, which I love your language there, because even in hearing this, it's like, it's the next best. You don't know if it's perfect, you don't know if it's anything else, but you're like, it's positive movement towards something instead of sitting. And I think that's probably one of the harder things, even for me, is when I'm in these moments where I've planned something out, whether just in my head or actually like literally like, so this is what I'm going to do, and then it doesn't happen. It's just that moment where I'm like, I'm defeated. Like, I don't want to do anything anymore. I just want to kind of sit. And sometimes it could take a while to get out of that, but it almost sounds like the faster you can take the next best step, the quicker you may live into a new plan and a new reality. Is that what you experienced?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I would say, there's a number of people who've really studied, this topic of anxiety and stress, and it's so much of it comes from inaction, not action.
Come on.
And so that's something that I've always looked to live by, is if I'm ever at a point where I feel like I'm in a rut or I'm stalled out, like, how do I just find that actual next step?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's almost like, I think as I'm hearing you, and then I want to keep going on your storyline here, but this is the big inflection point of your life, I would argue.
Mhm.
There's those things that you felt like you had in your plans and your control. Like, I'm going to go play football, college. Maybe I'm, going to do that at A&M and follow in my family's footsteps. You had a lot of that social pressure, family pressure, right? And then it doesn't happen. And so you have to choose, what am I going to do, right? Next best step, right? Go faith in people. I love the 1-2 punch, and make sure you're acting, upon that. But, when I think about just also parts of that story too, of like, you said that you obviously were raised in an awesome household, all these types of things. But like, when you heard the news that your family's getting a divorce, and I'm just picturing you in an apartment in this different world, like, you never had the opportunity to choose that. Like, that wasn't, not only was it not in your plans, that wasn't even something that you really had a say on. And then it just kind of happened to you. I think that one, I'd be curious to get your advice to the listeners out there that have these things that go on to them. And I'm using this as one example that's just really hard, that maybe there is not really an action. Like, because it's done. Like, you can't change it, and now it's happening to you. But there's got to be something you could do when faced with that reality. Anything there that's different than when you can control maybe parts of it?
Yeah. I think it all comes down to perspective. At the time, while the kind of, our immediate family was, obviously that foundation became very rocky.
Sure.
My extended family really stepped in. And I can tell you that was something that, for me at the time, like, they were very positive influences for me. And I think maybe not everyone is blessed when they go through a tough time to have people that lean in, that are the best influences. And for me, that's what it was. And so it was a mixture of that, but I think it was a mixture of, you really have to, find your own convictions. And it's something that we've talked about, throughout time. I'm very fortunate that my family has always, like, raised me in a way that really was very encouraging and made me feel like I could believe in myself, but also, they held me accountable whenever I didn't live up to what I was capable of. And I think there was different people during that time that have gone through very similar things that were outside of my family that I respected a ton. And it's something that even today, anytime that I've gone through that, I've always, wanted to kind of sleep on it, sit in it, really find perspective, whether that was from podcasts or books or, people that I could draw something from life experience wise, because at that point in time, you're 18, 19 years old, and you have, a little bit of life experience, but you don't have enough to really navigate some of those tough moments in time. And I think a lot of people have this idealist view when it comes to mentorship and it comes to just people in general. They're either good or bad. And, you could have somebody can have 99 amazing things and have something wrong, and then that person's no longer good. I think for me, it was always like, you can learn something from anybody. And so how can I draw different things from, people across the the country that have gone through things, people in my local community. And so I think that was a big part of it.
Man, that is so good. And thanks for sharing that, because I do think it's interesting how much this whole community aspect of your story, like, you've been lifted by the community around you, and you've relied on that community then to change your perspective. And that perspective on the things that maybe you had no say or no control in just allowed you to switch your perspective and then say, well, this is where I'm going, so I'm going to do it. And this is how I accept that this is happening. And then things that you could, it sounds like that's what led you to have no inaction. It led you to that next best step. So I think these are gold takeaways. So let's keep going on the story. So, okay, you're in the college of your hometown, and then you're like, I'm going to A&M. And so, to my understanding, you got into A&M. What happened?
So I got into A&M, and one of my big goals at that point in time was to also walk on for the football team.
Okay. So you didn't give up the dream. All right.
Didn't give up the dream. I was like, I was going to go back, and you're just looking for anything that's going to really motivate you. And I think this kind of goes into kind of maybe the last question that you asked is, when things are out of your control, I've always found is like, what are the things you can control? And I think I've seen that in so many facets, and professionally, personally. For me, even when getting started in this business, there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of, are you going to be successful, or what's going to happen? And, but I've always looked at, like working out was something. If I can get up early, if I can work out, if I can eat right, if I can, have this mindset where I'm reading, like all those things I can control, no matter what's happening to me in the world is going on. And I think at that point in time, that was a big one for me. So I ended up, I tried to walk on for the team. I think the tryout lasted 15 minutes. I think they kind of was more of a let's look and see how, big everybody is, and let's pick some, two of the biggest guys there. But and I was like one of the people that got put on like a waiting list thing, and just kind of never really heard any of the results. And that's kind of one of the things, like at a point in time, I know there's a lot of things I look back on my life and I had faith. But there's times that like I didn't have faith. And I think the times that I regret were times that I didn't have faith to go do something that needed to be done. Like at that point in time, I wish I would have gone to the coaches that, I was in contact with this coach who was like, hey, we think we're going to have a spot for you. And then kind of radio silence. Like I wish I would have just went to the field house at that point in time and told them like, hey, I'm here and I can play and things like that. And I think if I look back on my life, and that's my biggest advice to anybody, is the things you look forward, like you are most proud of, or the times you stepped outside of your comfort zone. And at that time I stayed in my comfort zone. I didn't go take the extra step to go talk to them. And so as I look back, I think it's also something too, like when you look at now thinking back, it's probably an unanswered prayer, because I'd have been a tackle dummy on the football team. And back then, it was a stout defense we had in those years. And so I probably would be pretty
concussed, maybe. Who knows?
Concussed, maybe may still be. So I think for me at that point in time, there's a lot of things, prayers that were answered, prayers that weren't, and that's not good or bad. That was just part of the story and part of the plan.
You just put one out there that I was hoping we go to, which is Chase. You're talking about faith in oneself, and I think that that's an interesting one that we all have a hard time talking about, because we don't want to go on the borderline of arrogance and talk about attention, right? Because the more that we step out and be like, I'm secure in myself, I'm going to go crush it, I'm, then we're like, oh man, now we're that arrogant person we never wanted to become. However, the tension of that is if we're like, no, I'm not going to call the coach because they're right, I'm not good enough. You sit and you tell us the story, right? Yeah. And it never happened. And so fair to say that for you, when the reality sets in that the plan may not happen, what you're saying is make sure you gave it your doggone best to make sure that truly is the new reality. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I push it to the limit, because if you ever, for me personally, if I look back at any point in time that I didn't, make that last, step, or that last, bit of effort, you always think, what if? And I think, as I think about even, the progression of my career and the doubts that you have in adulthood, it's like, you experience that, and still do. And so I think it's something I've really tried to think back on, even, when you're 17 and 18 and you're, 20, 21, 22. And these point in times that, obviously you're in a much, much different stage, and your, life perspective is limited in different ways. But they definitely shape who you are. And I've tried to go back to like, what were those emotions that I was feeling? What were those like, so that I can speak into it whenever other people are going through it.
Come on. Because you want to be that very community that was to you in those times. Right?
That's right.
That's what's
exactly right.
It reminds me, I mean, obviously, I quote a lot in Ecclesiastes, but that woe to the person that falls that doesn't have anyone to pick them up. And I think that just to say here, Chase, I think you're a wonderful example of having the humility to be picked up in some of those big situations. But then I've seen you over the last decade pick so many people up And just that comment shows your heart there. And I think that's a big piece of this, because I also wonder how many times, if we look at what we're going through, if we say, gosh, you know what, I'm going to get through this thing and it's going to be a heck of a coaching session I can give to somebody 5 years from now, if we go through that in a better way, right? And so I think that's wonderful. So let's keep going on the story. So you don't end up playing football at A&M, right? You've got great friends, you learn a ton, you mature in college, and now it's time to choose a job. So you choose Apple. And that was a big deal. I mean, coming from Beaumont and some of the things that you mentioned, just about like changing colleges and all of these things, what was no small deal that you got that. You made plans, right, to study hard and do well. And then you got, we think about it's a great company now, but even then, that was a really cool offer to get.
Oh, yeah.
So you get it, you accept it. But one of the things that has always intrigued me, and I've just taken so much wisdom out of you, is you get to your onboarding at Apple. Okay, fresh out of school, here we go. And you laid these plans, and yet this is a different part of the tension, right, of plans and reality.
Oh, yeah.
Like, walk us through the story of when you know that the plans you made, you now need to change because of reality, not because someone else wants to change. Talk to us about what happened when you got onboarded there. And Apple's a great company for all the listeners out there. This is just Chase's story. Okay, Chase.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and if anybody, my old coworkers are listening, they had a lot of grace for me. I was very green, and they helped me a ton. So if you're listening, I do appreciate it. At the point in time, you're 22, 23, and I think, because of the mission of 49 Financial and developing the next gen of financial leaders in the industry, like I see this all the time, and it reminds me so much of that time that I was in, where you're 22, 23, you've been in school your whole life. You wake up and everyone around you is asking, like, what are you going to do for the next 30 or 40 years? And
so stressful. Yes.
And it's the same inflection point that I had. I felt like, going to college, it reminded me a ton of that. And, for me, I always thought, I'd go live in Houston, or I would go, because I had a lot of friends, at that point in time, a lot of my roommates and a lot of my close friends were going to that city, and that seemed to be an easier transition than going to a new city. And so it was a big move to go to Austin. And it's kind of just interesting to see in the domino effect as I look back on my life. And I would imagine all the listeners could feel the same way, is one of the big reasons I even went to Austin was for Apple and the opportunity. And so that's what brought me to Austin. I was fortunate to, have some friends from college that were going out there too. And then as I look at that time, I'm in onboarding, and the manager, who's great and well-intentioned, told me in my onboarding, she said, what's great about this role is you can be two different people. You can be one person outside the office in your personal life, and then you can be one person in your professional life. Oh, and wow. And was speaking as if that was a great, great part of it. And I was just fortunate. And I think this is why mentors are so amazing. I worked very closely with a very successful, Texas A&M graduate that I respected a ton. And whenever I was in school, my internship in College Station, and he said the exact opposite. And so I think, when you have these people who speak truth into you, remember it. Because I got to see how he lived his life and his family. And I just really respected his opinion a ton and his perspective on business and things. And so at that time, I heard that, and I'm like, okay, that's a little different, but I'm going to give this, a fair shot. And worked there for just under 2 years. And it was, taking it all in, had some good coworkers that I worked with, but I was the youngest person in my department by 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So it's very different than when you go from being surrounded around people between the age of 18 and 22 to now you're the youngest person by 10 years at this massive corporation. But yes, very exciting time that I transitioned into. And then I definitely learned a ton about what I liked, what I didn't like in that experience.
And so you get to your second year. You obviously know in that onboarding, right? You've got almost these two things on your shoulders, right? Talking at you. You've got the, hey, separate work and life, and hey, it should really be one thing. And you kept kind of favoring, this side of it should all be one thing. And so effectively, that's kind of what caused you to start saying this isn't right for me? Is this, so it's just very interesting about your story of you actually made the plan, you got the job, you're there, you could stay there for the next 30 years and keep doing well and all these things. And you then said, I'm going to switch my reality, even though it's not in the plans.
That's
because mentorship, advice, changing perspective, community told you. Like, I just think that is such a, it's just a neat thing that all throughout this, whether you're choosing, not choosing all these things, it comes back to you have mentors and you have people that you trusted. And it seemed to resonate with your convictions. And then you would make decisions based on that, whether it was next best step or I'm actually not going to be here in Apple. So how did you make the transition? I mean, obviously we've been, lucky enough to work together now for a long time. And I knew you coming over from Apple. So talk to me about like when you left Apple, like, why did you make the call outside of this guy saying, hey, you should do it together? Like, because it's a bold call. Apple's good salary, good benefits, to go try it and not be promised anything. I mean, that's a pretty big shift in your life.
Yeah, I would say there's a few reasons why. As I looked at, I was very fortunate. Two of my best friends to this day, roommates of mine from A&M, their parents were very successful in business, and I saw the opportunities that they were afforded due to that. And I looked at whether it was them, I looked at people that would come speak to us at A&M, and it was always people who they took risk early on in their career, and then that paid off dividends down the road. And so as I looked at where I was at, I could see people, and it for them, it was their plan and they were happy about it. But I could see people who were 20 years from me, and I worked in the HR department, financial benefits, 401k plans, things like that. So I could see what everybody made. I could see how they were spending their time. And it started to make me look at that and say, well, I want a little more for my life than the impact. And at that point in time, I could really look at impact and income. And so it wasn't until I had some crazy health circumstance come up, something I was born with, that resulted in me having to have emergency surgery at 24 years old. I was put on bed rest for 2 months. And you go from a point in time where, myself, and there's other 24-year-olds out there that feel like this, but you feel like you're invincible. And I started to, when you have 2 months where you're just kind of like sitting on the couch or laying in bed at your parents' and grandparents' house as they're taking care of you, get a lot of time to think, and there's only so much TV and Netflix and stuff you can watch. And so I started to think, at all of the hours that I was spending working, and I started to think, wow, people don't tell you that, in a lot of cases you spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your own family. That, I felt like I was paid a certain salary. So I felt like my time in my life was valued based on that salary, not by the value that I could create with my time. And as I started to think about the life that I wanted to create for my family, the fulfillment I wanted to have at my retirement party one day, as I look back on all of the, people that I, have positively influenced, that was something that for me at that time, if I wouldn't have had that moment where I really reflected and thought maybe tomorrow isn't promised, because I felt like went invincible. And then they told me, after the fact that if I would have had the surgery whenever I did, I was probably a few hours from passing away. And for me at 24, that has a big impact on you. So when you start thinking about the risk that it takes to leave a behemoth of a company like Apple with all the benefits and stuff to do something that the upside is much, much greater in what you can do from impact and income, but there's more unknown, it makes you more okay with that decision. And so good. And then in addition, Greg Rosner, who was on this podcast a couple of podcasts ago, he was somebody who was a close friend of mine, always respected his opinion. And I think that goes into the community and the, relationships you have, because that definitely influenced and strengthened my trust that I had to take that next step. at the firm.
Yeah. Man, Chase. Okay, so I've just got to say it because we've been spending 40 something minutes together. This is really interesting. I actually didn't think that it would go here. This is so much better. So it's effectively for you, like we go back to it. And had you not like loved football and really wanted to do it and really wanted to pursue it and all those types of things, like had you not do that, you probably wouldn't have found yourself in that spot 1.5 years, 1 year out of school, sitting in your local college. Like, what do I do? And that love of football then drew you to then I'm going to go to A&M. I'm going to do it because you still want to walk on the team. But then you didn't make that. So yet again, another reality check comes in, but you meet all these friends, you learn all these things, right? And then that's what actually propels you to be able to go to Apple. And then you go to Apple and you're there. And effectively, because of a surgery that sounds like it could have been life-threatening. I mean, we're just glossing over that, by the way. That's sitting on what a lot of people complain, like, I got to be out for 2 months. This is the worst. Yet another one of these things that happens to you then totally alters your ability to choose. So I don't know, as I'm listening, it's really interesting to hear that, like, you are such a man that says in all of the capacities of when life just goes up, down, does all that it does, reality versus plans change, I'm going to follow and rely on the people that I trust. And then secondarily, you're just a guy that doesn't get down. When a bad thing happens to you, and a lot of people would give up, and a lot of people would say, like, I'm not doing that, or there's a hard thing in front of you, like, you just chase it. And I think that there's something to be said of surround yourself by great people. And when something really negative or you perceive to be negative at the time happens, give it some time and you can see how that charted your path, right? And I so many parts of my life I can go into of like, I would have never chose brain surgery, this or that. And yet after it, I'm like, had that not occurred, this, and this wouldn't happen. And so I think it's this wonderful lesson of how do you deal with reality that isn't your plans. But Chase, we are running out of time. This has been epic. So, I wanted to talk about how all of that paid off, right? You made the move. And if I have it right, you have now impacted hundreds, maybe thousands of more lives cumulatively during your time, depending if you compare the jobs. But in addition, from an income standpoint, I think in a month this year, you've made double what you would have made in salary when you started there at Apple, which is just a testament to you're really great at your job. And so you think about so you've gotten more impact in income, right? You've gotten the things you wanted, but you took the bold step to do it. Now, maybe it took a surgery and having to sit around for 2 months to get there. But I mean, just for everyone out there, okay, that's all going great and that works. Some parts of your story didn't work, but also you met the love of your life. Right? You're trying kids. Talk to us. Just last question for you, maybe is talk to us about plans versus reality when it comes to this beautiful thing of starting a family and getting married and have these wonderful kids. Anything there wisdom wise for the person sitting there yearning for that, but maybe it hasn't happened for them yet.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's I know today we've talked a lot about just my career and professional life, but there is a lot of things over the course of, those initial first few years, after Apple, where I'm trying to get my, foundation of my, book of business going and moving into different leadership opportunities. And then from a personal standpoint, with my wife, Cambry, if I would have never moved to Austin, I would have never met my wife, Cambry. Then you can,
thank you, Apple.
Yeah. And, that was something I can tell you, I was like, did I ever doubt it? No, I just was once I met her, we kind of knew. And I was just very blessed for that. And I think that it kind of goes back into my faith aspiration. God's plan is, whether unanswered prayers, answered prayers are better than what, it's my life and that I get to live now. The fulfillment I get to have at work, being able to go home to a wife like Cambry and our son, Easton, who's 18 months, he looks just like my wife. So hopefully this next one, I get a little bit of my genes. So it's probably a good thing. But it's just amazing. And it's I think about my relationship with her, my relationship with Easton, and just being able to combine our families. It's just been something that as I go into times in my life now, because, we've had some, different health stuff come up with our son, Easton. You have doubts, and as a parent, you want to protect them. You want to take some of the pain that they may feel in different situations away. And I have to always go back on the faith, in my Christianity and my and God's plan that He has for me, and then along with all the other aspects of introducing community into what I'm going through and being vulnerable. And so I think that is something that it's really cool to look back on and see the ripple effect that all those small decisions and those moments that seemed so big at the time and so unknown, how everything kind of, works out as long as you continue to keep the main thing.
Let's go, Chase Bertrand. Well, everyone out there, I don't know that I could say it better. You got to hear Chase's story, and I think what he just said there at the end is so good. Like, you don't know. Chase is relying, saying, God, it's your plan. You do what you want to do, and I'm just going to keep surrounding myself by a great community, not giving into the high highs and low lows, but knowing that wherever I'm going on this path, it'll all lead to something better if I can continue to control what I control and keep acting upon it, right? And so, Chase, thank you for being on The Tension.